What's up, freaks? I'm gonna give you the best hypertrophy exercises that every athlete can use, and we're gonna start right now. Okay, so first we've got to go over what is hypertrophy. And this can essentially happen through two different means of hypertrophy. So there's myofibrillar hypertrophy, which is an increase in the number of myofibrils, which are filaments that essentially make up a muscle fiber. So over a long period of time, if you're doing, let's say for years and years on end, 10 sets of 2 back squats and your strength is going up, you'll get a much more dense muscle, which will increase in size. And then that second key aspect is going to be sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. Sarcoplasmic hypertrophy does exist. To those that believe it's fake, it's real. This is a concept where there's a growth in the sarcoplasm inside of the cellular wall, and this leads to other metabolic components that increase in size that can contribute to the increase in size of your muscle fiber. So these are two key concepts that we have to understand. Myofibrillar hypertrophy, sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, both can increase the size of a muscle, okay? If we increase the size of a muscle, ideally long-term, that contractile structure will increase in size and it also will increase in strength. So how do we know that we lack hypertrophy? Okay, so why is hypertrophy good for athletes? Why is it good for sports performance? First, if we increase the muscle mass, it will lead to better contractile force, higher contractile force, which will make us stronger, okay? Then we can put out more power. The second key concept is that if we bodybuild and we're doing higher reps, we're leading to more structural integrity. We're gonna have a more stable joint. Okay, if we are lagging in certain areas, we have an area where, let's say our lats are a little bit weaker around our shoulders, or our traps are pathetically weak when we're weightlifting or when we're, throwing something. If we can use concepts of pre-fatigue, now we can achieve more hypertrophy, which increases the strength of those lagging areas. So the first way to understand if you lack hypertrophy is maybe you have small arms or small legs relative to your peers. Think about when people get their arms or legs broken and then they have their arms and legs taken out of that cast, how much smaller those limbs become because they're stagnant. They're not actually able to be stimulated while they're in that immobile cast. So that leads to a lack of muscular growth. Instead, the muscle diminishes in size and the individual lacks hypertrophy. So simply looking at the size of your arms and also understanding if you're typically weaker than most individuals, you also likely lack hypertrophy. Okay, so that number one exercise for hypertrophy, I believe, is a back squat. And a lot of people will say, oh no, it's not the best, it's not the best. But I believe if you train low bar and high bar together, you can get huge muscular gains. And so I like to do, if we can think about Olympic weightlifters, right? They have huge quads, they have huge glutes, and that's from all of the myofibrillar hypertrophy that they achieve in their training. So they do a lot of squatting, right? They'll do sets of 2 all the way up to sets of 7. But most of their sets are gonna be 6, 7, 8 sets of 2 to 5 reps. So over time, when you're doing that over a year, that leads to that myofibrillar hypertrophy and a massive increase in strength. If we wanna focus purely on hypertrophic gains, okay, we wanna increase that strength. And then I would say back end of the week, if you don't need to focus on your dynamic strength and you want to focus on more strict bodybuilding hypertrophy work, you can go a little bit more narrow with that back squat. You could even go a little bit wider and do low bar, but go 4 sets of 17 reps, 5 sets of 17 reps. That's where you're gonna light up your quads, you're gonna light up your posterior chain, and that's gonna lead to serious hypertrophic gains. Okay, so that second key exercise to increase hypertrophy is going to be a dumbbell incline bench with a slow eccentric. And here's a little bit of a trick. If we train this twice a week, I like to do a little bit of a heavier weight for, let's say, 7 sets of 5. So we can push that 5 rep max over the span of like set 4, set 5, set 6, and then maybe you do a drop set of a lighter weight for a set of 5. So if we've got here, get a little bit of a heavier load, we press and we want to go 1, 2, 3, 4, up. 2, 3, 4. Okay, that was 4. What I want to see is one day a week we go a little bit heavier, and then on a hypertrophy day later on in the week, we can stimulate some serious growth by doing like 4 sets of 20. Okay, so lighter load, 4 sets of 20. So what we're doing is on the earlier part of the week, we're trying to stimulate myofibrillar hypertrophy. Later on in the week, sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. Before we continue to help you get swole as let's talk about recovery. One of the key factors behind getting swole is making sure that 1, we're under tension for a long period of time, and 2, we're recovering and we're actually using proper nutrients for sarcoplasmic growth. That's exactly why I recommend using creatine, Transcend creatine, specifically from earth-fed muscle, along with whey protein from earth-fed muscle. It's grass-fed whey, and it's gonna help you continue to make those gains so that you can be more hypertrophic and get swole as Damn it. There we go. Okay, so that third key exercise is going to be the leg press. I can hear all the sports performance gurus out there saying, oh my gosh, this is terrible. You should not be using the leg press for athletes. But hear me out on this. If you have someone who's longer limbed, they struggle to achieve hypertrophy in their quads, okay? Guarantee you, I know this from personal experience, okay? One of the few movements that will blow up your quads and actually get them to increase in muscle mass, increase in size, which can then be used to carry over to acceleration, is actually the leg press. Now, if I want to push this with weight with myofibrillar hypertrophy, typically what I would do is I would either do unilateral, so I do one leg at a time, or I go really, really heavy, and I would do just 3 or 4 sets of 4 prior to doing my heavier back squats, okay? So actually using it as like a stimulation, as a warm-up before our back squats on those heavy days. On the hypertrophy days, I would use the leg press for super high reps, 4 sets of 30, 4 sets of 35. And then I would go do some drop sets with my high bar back squat or with my low bar back squat, depending upon what area I have problems with. If we're discussing specifically athletes, sprint cyclists benefit tremendously from doing leg presses. Some sprinters benefit tremendously from doing leg presses. They're not that terrible. There is some carryover. And also, it is okay if you do have some back pain, get on the leg press, that's okay. It's going to stimulate some growth. If you don't have access to a leg press, I would recommend getting on a sled, driving forward, or pulling backwards. Both of those are gonna be decent replacements for the leg press, and in most cases, I would argue, could achieve better carryover to the sports world, but they would not achieve the same level of hypertrophy that the leg press will achieve. Okay, so here's a great example. This is my dad. He's like 95 years old. And so one of the best ways that hypertrophy can help athletes is by increasing the size of their traps, their lats, their shoulders. Dad always had no neck growing up, and part of this was because of how much hypertrophy work he did early on. He was a wrestling coach, and he was a guy that when he would grab you, you could barely even feel anything because he was blocking off your nervous system, and he'd throw these heavy collar ties, and a lot of that is related to the hypertrophy work that he was doing. And so ironically, he's here today doing these TBar rows, and I recommend if we want to achieve myofibrillar hypertrophy on TBar row, we can load this up like crazy, okay? We can do 6 sets of 6. We can do 7 sets of 5 on that earlier day in the beginning of the week. And then on the back end, if we really want to blow up our weight and we're trying to even increase muscle mass to then also go up a weight class, if we are talking about wrestling or maybe even weightlifting or powerlifting, we're in a weight class and we want to try to gain more muscle mass, that's where we can do 4, 5 sets of 20 to 25 reps, especially on something like the TBar row, where we're trying to target slower twitch muscle groups. That's good. So freaks, do all 4 of these exercises. Do one day that targets more myofibrillar hypertrophy, 7 triples, 7 sets of 5, something like that. Another day during the week where you do 4 or 5 sets of 20 to 30 reps for that sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. And if you need help, you're getting small. Your arms are as little as they were when they came out of that cast when you broke your arm. Click on the link down below, go to garagestrength.com and pick up our mass builder program so so that you can get swole today. Until next time, guys, remember, you always have to cultivate your power. Peace.